I've been listening at the door for 15 minutes.
Really?
Waiting to come in.
I have this propensity to just keep going and going and going, but there's so many thoughts that
You're
people.
just so smart.
The,
How
the world,
not?
the world just needs to know these things.
I agree.
If you're a man and you're feeling overwhelmed and burnt out in your career and you're struggling with low testosterone and low energy as a result of it, this video is for you because I'm going to explain the connection between low testosterone and burnout, actionable protocols that you can use to restore your testosterone levels and recover from burnout, as well as time management and productivity strategies that you can use to make implementing these protocols as seamless as possible. I know how much burnout sucks because I've been there too. The first real bad bout of burnout that I dealt with in my life was early in college. I was a double major in biology and exercise science, which are two pretty intensive majors, while also playing football for a team that won 3 consecutive conference championships. So we had really high standards on that team. We had a lot of meetings, our practices ran long, we were working out a ton because that's what it takes to be a winner. You got to put a lot of time and effort into the things that you want to be good at. But since I wanted to be good at 2 majors and football, this was a lot on my plate and I did not handle it well. My first few years of college, I was stressed out of my mind because, my goal was to get straight A's. I wanted to become a doctor. And that combined with football was just almost too much for me to handle. And it got to the point where at the end of every semester, for pretty much my first 2 years of college, I would reach a breaking point where there was nothing I looked forward to more than the semester ending. And I would go home and literally have these breakdowns, on winter breaks and summer breaks where there would be a few days where I was basically incapacitated. I would just be bedridden almost for a few days. I'm totally serious because I was just so fried and stressed from the semester. But what I didn't realize at the time, and what I wish I could tell my past self, is that all the burnout and stress was self-created. Burnout and stress really are just amorphous, abstract concepts. It's actually our inability to handle them that creates them in the first place. But that's what we're going to talk about later. But one thing I wanted to highlight about my struggles with burnout and stress in college is that it had significant negative effects on my sexual life. Keep in mind, this was happening at a time when I was early in college. I was about 19, 20, 21, and this is the age period where testosterone levels should naturally be the highest. So the fact that I was experiencing low testosterone and low libido and erectile dysfunction at this period of my life goes to show how powerful burnout really can be. Because if it took such a hit on my sexual health when I should have been full of virility, imagine what it could do to someone who's a little bit older. So burnout is no joke. It's really serious and it affects your hormones to a significant degree. So here's what happened. I had so much pent up stress and burnout from my classes and from football that it bled over into my sex life. Every time I'd try to go hook up and have sex with a girl, I would view sex as a stressor. And when this happened, it activated my fight or flight nervous system, and this would cause me to have erectile dysfunction because it's called psychogenic erectile dysfunction. It's when you get stage fright and this causes your body to have a panic response, and when your body's having a panic response, it can't get erect. And we'll leave it that simple. But to make matters worse, going into sexual situations, I didn't really have much libido to begin with because I was carrying around so much burnout and stress that my testosterone levels were on the lower side. The stress hormone cortisol blocks testosterone from doing its job. So not only did I have a lower sex drive than I should have had, but I also had this predisposition towards stress and burnout, which affected everything that I did. And since it affected my sex life as well as my testosterone levels, it kind of had a double hit on my masculine virility, you could say. So this goes to show that burnout can have a serious negative effect on your testosterone levels. And looking back, I'm actually grateful for that experience because I developed time management and stress management skills that I carry with me to this day that I'm going to share with you in this video right after I get through the second worst bout of burnout I've ever had in my life. And that was when I was getting my MBA. So I was getting my master's in business after I graduated from undergrad. But while I was getting the MBA, I was also starting this business on the side. Anyone who's ever tried to start a business knows that it's quite challenging and it's a lot of work. So doing that while simultaneously completing an accelerated master's degree was quite a lot on my plate. And this led to what I call the vicious cycle of highs and lows. I would have these highs where I'd have a lot of energy and motivation. I'd say, yeah, I'm gonna make this business get going. I'm gonna get straight A's in my MBA program. And I would have these sprints where I'd have a lot of high output. But the problem was I was operating at a pace that was not sustainable. And eventually it got to the point where I reached a peak and I ran out of gas, and slowly but surely my output, my energy, my focus would all decline, and it would all start to fall downhill until I got to the point where I'd reach a breaking point. I'd hit rock bottom. And when this happened, my life was terrible. I would come home to my apartment and I just would not be a loving partner to my girlfriends. I had no sex drive, like we weren't having sex at this time whenever I would reach these rock bottom points, because burnout kills your testosterone levels and testosterone drives libido. So again, this was only about a year ago, and clearly I have high testosterone, but it doesn't matter if you're getting all the physical aspects of testosterone right. If burnout is ruining your life, it's gonna ruin your testosterone levels. So when I'd reach rock bottom, I'd just be super negative and pessimistic, and I wouldn't even look forward to working on my business. I resented everything, and it was a pretty miserable existence. So eventually I'd reach the point where I'd get to rock bottom, right? And only when I reached rock bottom did I take burnout seriously enough to take measures to address it. So I would actually take time to improve my mindset, to manage my stress, to take a little bit of a deload. And when I did those things to help improve and revert burnout, I would rebound. I would get my energy back, and I'd say, okay, yeah, I'm good. I'm all set. I got all this energy. I'm going to attack. I'm going to get this business going. And it would repeat the same cycle. I would start working at a really vigorous pace that was unsustainable. I would work like 12 hours a day while trying to work out and stay in great shape and do jujitsu and all this stuff. And I never gave myself a moment to breathe. And I got shit done. But again, I would climb, I'd hit a peak, and then I'd reach a breaking point where I'd have no energy left, and it would lead to the same downhill cycle. But I'd have these highs and lows of high performance and breakdowns, high performance and breakdowns. But the thing is, my actual output level was about a flat line because I was the average between my highest and lowest standards. But if I just worked at a slower pace, but at a more sustainable level, I would have had a more consistent and steady work output as opposed to these highs and lows. It's kind of like the stock market where you have these peaks and crashes. And if you try to buy and sell and beat the market, it usually doesn't work. Whereas if you just ride the S&P 500, which is about like a 7 to 9% return on your investment every year, you're going to get a slow, steady, consistent return on your investment. And in this analogy, it works the same way. So I guess one actionable protocol when it comes to dealing with burnout that I've learned in my experience is to take a long-term approach and ask yourself if your current level of work output is something that you can sustain for years. Because I was, myself and a lot of other people who deal with work, who burn out, or who are high achievers, who have a lot of goals, we tend to get very myopic. It's like, okay, I want to make this happen now. I want to get it done now. And you sprint and sprint and sprint thinking that you're able to keep at that working out pace, keep working at that pace, but you can't. So you got to ask yourself, would I be able to maintain my current level of work output for months and years on end? And if not, you're probably on pace to burning out. And of course, there are some seasons of life where you do need to work and push a little bit extra hard to get something done, but then you need to counterbalance those sprints with seasons of keeping it a little bit more chill. Back to the stock market analogy, don't try to be a day trader. Don't try to buy and sell at the highs and lows. To avoid burnout, work at a pace that you can consistently maintain for a long period of time, and just seek slow, steady progress. And that's going to do much better for you than just sprinting and burning out, and then but your average is just a flat line and you're not actually making any progress. And this approach is something that I've recently just started implementing, and I have to tell you, it definitely is a bit of an adjustment because you're so used to working every hour, every second of the day. but I have to say the quality of my work has been much better, and I'm much more fulfilled, and I feel as though I can show up as the best version of myself to my work, and I don't resent it as much. And yes, you still need to work hard and work a lot to be successful in this world, but sometimes just easing off the gas just a little bit can make a major difference. You don't always have to push so hard all the time. So that's been my two worst bouts of burnouts and sort of my experience, so that you know that these strategies that I'm about to share with you come from real personal anecdotal experience. But it's not only in my life that I've dealt with burnout. I help my clients deal with burnout as well. A lot of the guys that I work with in my program, which is called the Testosterone Transformation Academy, it's a program where I help men optimize their testosterone levels naturally using lifestyle interventions, so like exercise, nutrition, stress management. But I also help men with their time management as well, because a lot of the guys in my program are busy professionals or students, you know, in master's programs and everything. So these guys don't have a whole ton of time to implement a lot of lengthy protocols. So long story short, within my program, I not only help guys implement testosterone optimization strategies in a time efficient way, I also teach a lot of the time management strategies I'm about to share with you in high detail to clients in my program. So if that sounds like something you could benefit from, a program that helps you optimize your testosterone levels naturally while doing so in a time efficient way and teaching you strategies to be more productive and efficient in your own life, go ahead and check out the top link in the description. You can check out the link to my program there. Now we're going to start getting into some of the strategies that you can use to alleviate burnout. And then after that, I'm going to explain some of the time management strategies that I teach. But before I get into them, the first thing you need to understand is the difference between stress and neural energy. So like I explained earlier, stress and the stress hormone cortisol both lower your testosterone levels. But there's also this concept of neural energy. So if you're not aware, you have a nervous system, which is your brain, your spinal cords, and all the nerves that innervate your cells and all your muscles in your body. So you have a nervous system. And this is kind of hard to quantify, and science is still coming with explanations for it. But your nervous system only has so much energy available to it. One of the core principles of science, I forget if it was Newton or Einstein who said this, but energy cannot be created or destroyed. So you need to understand that you only have a limited amount of energy to use in your life. And this energy can be expended in different ways. It can be expended in physical energy, like working out, but it can also, and when it comes to working out, most people think of energy just as caloric energy. You eat food, you break it down, and use the calories for energy. But we also have this concept of mental or neurological energy. And that is something that most people don't understand or respect. So, like we said, energy cannot be created or destroyed. And the energy that you use to think, whether it be at your career, which is where most people think the most, you have a limited supply of that as well. So if you are thinking a lot and using your brain power constantly, you're going to deplete your neural energy over time. So just simply understanding that your mental energy is a limited resource can help you reframe how you go about things in life, and understand that you only have so much bandwidth to apply to things. And when you respect your own limitations when it comes to your mental energy, you'll stop wasting it on things that don't matter as much. And it could actually be argued that this neural mental energy is the most powerful form of energy in existence. Because if you look around at the world, everything that's ever been created by human beings, things as powerful as the nuclear bomb, which has the capacity to destroy everything as we know it, was all conceived of as a thought. So this process of thinking and taking ideas and turning them into reality takes an immense amount of energy. And when you're doing this all day, using your mind and thinking, you deplete your energy levels. And when you combine that with stress, which is different than neural energy, because stress is more physical, that's in your body, that's driven by the hormone cortisol, you have two things detracting from what I call your systemic energy, which is the totality of your physical and your mental energy. So you have stress detracting from your physical energy, and you have mental overload and mental overwork detracting from your neural energy. And these both take away from your systemic or your total energy. Now, stay with me here. When you deplete your total energy, your body's testosterone levels go down because your body believes that you are essentially about to die. So to articulate this point, I'm going to take you back to the time of our caveman ancestors. The most important function of testosterone from an evolutionary standpoint is that it drives human beings to reproduce. It gives us libido, so the feeling of wanting to have sex, and testosterone also creates sperm, so testosterone drives sperm production. So by giving human beings the desire to have sex and the raw material needed to reproduce, testosterone's main job is to drive reproduction. However, reproduction cannot occur without survival. An organism, like us humans, can't reproduce if we're dead. So all organisms, including humans, must first prioritize survival before reproduction. So here's how this relates to your physical and mental energy. Whenever a primal human being, and this concept still applies today, but anytime a human being would do anything to ensure survival, it would require some sort of energy, whether it be physical energy or mental energy. For cavemen, the physical energy could be going out and physically hunting a woolly mammoth, and the mental energy could have been using thoughts to, whittle and create new weapons that it would then use to go hunt the woolly mammoths. But if a caveman is so desperate for survival that he's using all of his physical and or mental energy to safeguard his survival, it goes to show that he's not surviving well. So maybe the caveman is burned out because he doesn't have a lot of food, or he has to constantly think about where the threats are coming from. In either case, if a caveman has low energy systemically because his physical and mental energy are being drained, it shows that he's not surviving well. He's in a place of danger. So in this case, his body would shut down the desire to reproduce so that the caveman would focus more on using his energy for survival. And what does shutting down the desire for reproduction look like? Shutting down testosterone production, because we just established that testosterone drives sex drive and reproduction. And within this sphere of energy, you also have sexual energy. Reproduction itself, the act of inseminating a woman to create another human being, that requires energy, because energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? So how could it be that a literal life form, a human being, could be created without some form of energy? So we have sexual energy as well. And if a caveman's total energy is depleted because he's using so much of his mental and physical energy just to stay alive, just to survive, he's not going to have much sexual energy left. And sexual energy is manifested in the form of testosterone. Testosterone, the hormone itself, gives you energy. Just like the stress hormone cortisol causes you to feel stressed, and just like thoughts are electrical firings in your brain, all of these forms of energy have physical manifestations in the real world. Cortisol is a physical hormone. Testosterone is a lipid. It's a fatty, it's a real molecule. The electrical firings in our brains can be physically measured. So every time I say energy, this isn't just some ephemeral conceptual thing. These are all measurable things. So here's how all of this ties together. I know this is a bit tangential, but I promise it'll all make sense. Whenever your total energy in your life is depleted because you're stressed at work and you are overusing your mental bandwidth, your mental, cognitive, neural energy, when you're depleting those two energy sources, you are essentially signaling to your body that you are struggling to survive because you're using all of your energy for output to stay alive. When this happens, your body interprets that as a sign that you are not safe and that it's not a good time to reproduce. So it lowers testosterone production because you don't need the sexual energy that testosterone provides to reproduce, because your body's under the impression that you need all of your energy just to stay alive. So the purpose of that whole description was to bring your attention to the fact that your energy is a very limited resource. And most people don't understand or respect this. Most people give away their energy, which is the things they think about, the things that they allow to stress them out. Most people apply their energy to things indiscriminately, and they waste their energy on things that are not important. So my question for you is, what are things that you put energy towards that don't really matter? Do you put a lot of energy into getting angry about politics? Do you watch the news a lot and let yourself get all riled up and angry about things in the political world that are outside of control? Because if you do, kindling that emotion of anger and thinking about politics is detracting from the totality of the energy that you have available to you. And this can contribute to burnout. Another example is your intimate relationship. If your marriage or your relationship with your woman isn't going very well and you're having a lot of fighting and negativity, that creates a massive drain of emotional energy. And I noticed that in my own life. Whenever I was at the bottom of a burnout peak, I would get into a lot of arguments with my girlfriend because I wasn't being the quality of man that I should have been. I wasn't treating her the way that I should have been. And the conflict between us created a lot of negative energy that also contributed to my burnout, because I was putting a lot of thought and emotional investment into all the problems in the relationship. So if you're in a relationship and you have, or really any other unresolved interpersonal conflicts, I would highly recommend that you take measures to resolve them, because those can subconsciously bleed you of your energy in the background all day long. So the first thing you need to do is go through your life and find, what are things that I'm giving my time, attention, energy, and thought to that really isn't that important. The first example I gave was politics. Another one for a lot of guys is sports. They literally get emotionally invested in how well their sports team is doing. So you need to cut those things out, and you also need to mend your personal relationships to ensure that you aren't being sapped of emotional energy that can detract from your overall repository of energy. Because, like I said, that is very limited. So as you go about your life after watching this video, be very mindful of what you put your thought and emotions towards, because that detracts from the amount of energy that you have available to you and can contribute to burnout if you are not intentional about how you use it. This applies within the workplace as well. So if you put a lot of energy into things that don't matter, like emails or other arbitrary tasks, you're not going to have much energy for the most important tasks at work that really matter the most. So you should put your energy and thought and effort into things in proportion to how important it is. So if you have to rattle off a quick email, don't spend hours overthinking it. Just get the email out and then use your energy for the project or the thing that's actually going to move the needle and the thing that actually matters the most. So be very deliberate and mindful about how you use your energy, because it is a finite resource and most people don't realize this. A quick side note on energy, well, while we're on the topic, is the concept of sexual energy. So as I said before, you need testosterone to produce sperm to reproduce. And since energy can't be created or destroyed, every time a man ejaculates and reproduces, he loses some energy, because energy is needed to inseminate a woman and create a child. So if you happen to ejaculate quite frequently, maybe you masturbate, or when you have sex, you ejaculate every time, understand that each time you ejaculate, you're depleting yourself of your sexual energy, which takes away from your total energy, which can contribute to burnout. So if you have a demanding job and you think a lot about politics and you ejaculate every single day, you're losing energy on 3 fronts, which is why I highly recommend that all men practice semen retention and sexual transmutation. All that means is that whenever you have sex, instead of ejaculating at the end, you just bypass ejaculation, you skip it. You have sex and you don't ejaculate at the end. And Every time you feel horny, essentially what you do is you take a couple deep breaths and you imagine that you're moving that sexual energy through your body and through your mind. And this sounds a little bit woo-woo, and believe me, I'm all about hardcore science. But given what we know about how energy can come in physical forms, like we said, thoughts are a form of energy and they can be measured by electromagnetic resonance, and hormones like testosterone give you energy, and those are physical substances that flow around in your bloodstream. It's not too radical to say that sexual energy can have physical manifestations in the body as well. So the actionable protocol that you can apply to your life is don't ejaculate too often, not more than once a week. And whenever you notice an abundance of sexual energy, instead of releasing it through an ejaculation, take a couple deep breaths and just imagine moving that energy into your body and into your mind, and you can use that energy for other purposes. This is called sexual transmutation. If you want to learn more about it, you can read the book The Way of the Superior Man, you can read The Multi-Orgasmic Man, and you can read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. One of the last chapters, he talks about the importance of men harnessing their sexual energy instead of releasing it. So this is a very well-known concept in a lot of spiritual traditions and throughout history. It's just not something that we recognize or apply in our lives in the modern world. In all of my experience dealing with burnout and stress, I've come to realize that stress is all self-created, because all the work that you have to do, you can still do the work without the stress. One of my favorite quotes comes from a man named Sam Harris. He's a neuroscientist and a philosopher, and he says, you can get plenty of things done while being completely relaxed. So simply, instead of typing away at your computer in a ball of stress, or going about your day at work just in a cloud of negativity, you can do the exact same actions from a place of peace and equanimity. And I've found that every time I've reached a rock bottom in my life when it comes to burnout, it's because I stopped taking care of my mindset and my mental health. And the reason why your mindset is probably the most powerful contributor to whether or not you feel stressed or burnt out or your energy levels is because, again, thoughts are a form of energy. So if you're constantly thinking negative, stressful thoughts, those are going to drain you of energy. Because for me, a key indicator that I'm burnt out is I get negative and pessimistic. So it's sort of this negative feedback loop where I stop working on my mindset and my mental health. I neglect my mental health because I tell myself I'm too busy. When I stop doing that, it causes me to get burned out. And then when I get burned out, that makes my mental pessimism and negativity worse. And the cycle just goes round and round to rock bottom. So for me, the most powerful sign of burnout, which is a negative, pessimistic mindset, is caused by not taking care of my mindset and my mental health. So the cause and the sign are interrelated. So these are the things that I do, which when I do them consistently and make time for them, I almost never really deal with burnout because my mental health and my mindset are on par. The first thing I do is I study Stoicism. Stoicism is a philosophy that's designed to help you deal with the challenges of life, and it's super practical and applicable. It's not cerebral. So I always practice Stoicism. I read a book called The Daily Stoic, and I read that daily religiously. So practicing Stoicism. I have another video on Stoicism, which you can find linked here if you want to learn more about how to apply that to your life. The other thing I do is consistent meditation. And meditation does lower stress just by the act of deep breathing, but it also gives you the ability to watch and control your thoughts. And like we said, since thoughts are pretty much our most powerful source of energy, cultivating the ability to control your thoughts and let go of negative ones and foster positive ones instead will not only make you a lot less stressed and burnt out, but it'll also make you more effective, because if you have no control over your mind, you're usually just going to take action indiscriminately. You're going to mindlessly work on things that don't really matter. But when you meditate, you learn the ability to sort of step back and think, okay, what am I going to work on next and why? So it allows you to consciously choose where you're putting your energy. And this helps you sort of preserve your bandwidth. So the second thing I do in addition to Stoicism is meditation. 10 to 20 minutes a day. I use that philosopher, neuroscientist, Sam Harris. I use his app called Waking Up. Hands down the best meditation app on the market. So if you want to get started with meditation, I highly recommend Waking Up. And I just want to say that I cannot overemphasize the power of Stoicism and meditation. If you take nothing else from this video, those two things will really help with your burnout a lot. Those are the two most powerful needle movers I've ever noticed in my life. But the third thing that I do, which is pretty on par with Stoicism and meditation, is journaling. Journaling helps you get the thoughts and emotions that are stressing you out literally out of your mind and on paper. So they're no longer festering in the background of your brain, and you can kind of get a conclusion on them and let them go. It also helps you be more mindful again of what you're doing and why. If you journal what you plan on getting done in a day and you stick to that plan and make sure that you don't go working on a bunch of things that don't matter and expending your energy unnecessarily. So journaling really helps you think. Not only does it help you release thoughts and emotions and get them out of your mind, but it also helps you think clearly. By writing out your thoughts in full sentences, you can be a lot more rational and discerning. It'll help you make better decisions, which will just make you more executive and effective in your work. And the more effective you are, the less you have to work to get the same amount of output, which helps you preserve your energy and can help combat burnout. Another one you can try is affirmations. So these are just a list of I statements that you say out loud and with conviction. You say them every single day. And if nothing else, just saying these statements, it's just a good reminder of the type of person you want to be. So you can just list out affirmations that say something like, I don't allow myself to get stressed out. You could say, I am discerning and mindful of how I use my energy. And if you write out statements like that and you say them out loud every single day, it'll just remind you, those thoughts will pop into your mind throughout the day, and it'll remind you not to waste your energy, and it'll remind you not to let things stress you out. So affirmations can be good for reminding yourself about how you want to conduct yourself. And the other one is just reading positive books. Most human beings are not naturally positive, and there's a lot of evolutionary reasons for this. I'm going to just avoid that rabbit hole for today. But being positive mentally is not easy. So you need to constantly and actively and use effort and energy to reprogram your mind to be resilient, to handle stress. That's where Stoicism comes in, but also to be positive, because the more positive you are, the less negative energy you have to draining from your overall energy and causing burnout. So just read books like Think and Grow Rich. Just read a lot of self-help books. Cybernetics is a good one. And by constantly reading uplifting material, it's going to program and rewire your brain to be a more positive person, which will help with burnout as well. And that makes me want to bring up another point, which is that in our society, most people completely neglect the importance of working on their mindset at all. You know, you don't really hear anyone talking about the importance of reading and meditation. We sort of have a cultural blind spot when it comes to the importance of our mental health and how we can actually improve it. So no wonder so many people are burnt out, because we're not using any of our energy to fix and combat burnout. So if you're burnt out, you know, maybe take some measures to actually address it. You can be an absolute master of time management and productivity, but if you aren't taking care of your mental health and you're not using your energy effectively, you're going to end up burnt out regardless of how effective your time management skills are. And speaking of time management, this is another cultural blind spot, which is that most people don't really know how to manage their time very well. So I'm going to break down some tools that you can use to manage your time better so that you can implement some of those mindset strategies like Stoicism, journaling, meditation, because those things take time. But if you're watching this, you probably already feel busy. So you're probably wondering, how am I going to find the time for that? Well, by applying these time management strategies, you should be able to free up some of your time to take care of the one thing that actually matters most, which is your mental health. One of my favorite quotes comes from Tim Ferriss, and he says, "Being busy is simply a result of lazy thinking and indiscriminate action." So his point is that busyness just means that you're not thinking clearly and you're not being decisive about how you're using your time. And one of his most highly recommended time management strategies is called Pareto's principle. In almost all areas of life, 80% of the outputs come from 20% of the inputs. So for example, in weightlifting, 80% of muscle growth comes from 20% of exercises, which is the big full body exercises like bench press, squats, deadlifts, etc. And usually in business, 80% of money is made from 20% of recurring customers. So there's this interesting universal law where you almost always get outsized returns in your life from 20%, roughly. Some people call it 90-10, but from a small amount of inputs. In everything that you do, think, what's the 20%, what's the small amount of inputs that I'm doing that's yielding the most amount of results? And once you identify what those few things are, you can focus all of your time and energy on those things as opposed to trying to do everything. So for example, in your work, maybe going back and forth in endless meetings, like so many people at work spend like half the day in mindless meetings and sending emails that don't really mean anything. Whereas if they just focused on the 20% of activities that actually create results, like working on whatever the team project, you can just cut out all the other stuff that's not really generating any results, save a bunch of time, and actually get more results by focusing on the things that matter most. Another way to frame this is by asking yourself, what's the one thing that I can accomplish which, if accomplished, would make everything else easier or unnecessary? This comes from a book called The One Thing. It's a business book. So just ask yourself, if I could only do one thing to achieve X, Y, or Z result, what would I do? So for example, if you wanted to build muscle, what would be the one thing that you do? Lift weights. If you want to start a business, what's the first thing you need to do? The first thing you need to do is attract customers by marketing. So by asking yourself, what's the one most important thing? The one thing, you take the 80-20 principle and boil it down into the one thing that you can apply in the present moment. And that really helps you clarify what's the most important thing I can be doing right here, right now. And by focusing on what's actually most important, you'll realize that a lot of what you're doing is just wasting time and wasting your energy, which is why you feel so burnt out. It's because you're not focused on what matters most. And the reason why Tim Ferriss says this busyness comes from lazy thinking and indiscriminate action is because this process of continually refocusing on the most important thing is extremely difficult. I struggle with it all the time. I find myself doing things that don't matter most. So you have to constantly remind yourself, which requires mental energy, to focus on what is the one thing that really, really matters most to get 80% of my outputs. There's also a concept called Parkinson's law, which states that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. So if you give yourself a month to complete a project, that project is going to take a month. But if you set the deadline for 1 week, you're going to get it done in a week. And you can even set it to 3 days. You're going to find a way to get it done in 3 days. And this isn't about necessarily rushing your work and doing low quality work. But a lot of times if we just sit down with a task in front of us and we just say we're going to get it done when we get it done, we often tinker with little details that aren't important. We over perfectionize and we make things take way longer than they need to. So if you just say, I'm getting this project done by the end of the day, no matter what, it forces you to focus on what matters most. And it forces you to focus on the 20% of things that really matter. So setting deadlines and applying Parkinson's law is a great way to apply the 80-20 rule because it forces you to focus on the things that are actually most important. So if you apply these principles to everything you do, you can actually save yourself a lot of time, which you can then free up to relax and work on your mental health and your mindset. So going back to this concept of busyness is a form of lazy thinking and indiscriminate action. A lot of people say that they're busy, but they spend a lot of time on things that show that they really aren't that busy. If you have all day Sunday to watch football, but then you say you don't have time to go to the gym, you really don't have your priorities straight. Or if you have 2 or 3 hours, I forget how much TV the average American watches, but it's absurd. If you watch Netflix every single day, you're probably not that busy. You just don't have your priorities straight. So I think everyone should have a Google Calendar, and if you take a look at how you spend your money and your time, really are a reflection of your overall values and priorities. So if you're spending a lot of time watching the news, watching football, watching Netflix, scrolling on your phone, it shows that your priorities are on those things and really not on fixing your burnout. So if you aren't already blocking out how you're spending your time every day on a calendar, start doing that. You don't need to be super retentive about it, keep it pretty general, but it can be pretty enlightening to see how much time that you waste on things that you don't realize. Because another great quote that comes from the book Time Management for Mortals is that the decision to do one thing is a decision not to use that time on anything else. So the decision to watch Netflix is a decision not to meditate. The decision to watch the news is a decision not to read Stoicism. So you have to think of things in terms of opportunity cost. Every time you spend time doing something, you are guaranteeing that you're not going to spend that time in any other ways, which might be more productive for alleviating your burnout. So now that you've freed up some of your time by being more discerning about how you use it, another tool that you can use to help alleviate burnout is living life from the parasympathetic nervous system. So you have two forms of your nervous system. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and this is what activates when you're stressed and you're highly aroused. And then you have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also called feed and breed, and this is when you're more relaxed. But the thing is, most human beings perceive everything as a threat, as stressful. So we go around our daily lives constantly perceiving this email, this red light. We perceive these things as stressors. So most people live in a state of constant fight or flight. So the fight or flight hormones are cortisol and epinephrine, and both of these actually give you a little bit of a boost of energy, and some people can actually get addicted to feeling stressed. So the best way to get out of the highly stressed sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, is your breathing. When you breathe deeply, your diaphragm activates your vagus nerve, which slows your heart rate. So you should try to incorporate deep, slow breathing all throughout the day. And when you live from the feed and breed relaxed nervous system, you start to notice when little things cause you to feel stressed, and you're more sensitive to stress, and you're more mindful and you're more aware of it. So a couple ways that you can cultivate your ability to breathe deeply and relax is yoga, NSDR, and just being mindful of your breathing throughout the day. I would also recommend that you if you happen to be someone who consumes a lot of caffeine, I'd highly recommend you cut down your caffeine intake, because caffeine can really make you jittery. And again, you don't get that energy boost you feel from caffeine for free. It's because caffeine releases some of these fight or flight hormones. So I would recommend that you cut back your caffeine consumption. It's something that I've done lately, and it definitely helps to reduce that feeling of being mentally fried and burnt out. It can also help you sleep better too. Coming off of caffeine can be tough for a lot of people. So to help you reset your natural mental energy levels, start every day by getting natural sunlight in your eyes. This is going to release natural dopamine and give you mental energy so that you won't need caffeine. And also exercise. Exercising gives you energy. Just you have to expend energy to get energy. So exercising, expending energy, releases a lot of endorphins that make you feel great. And if you say that you don't have time for exercise, wind back to the part of the video where we talked about your priorities and the 80-20 rule. So you should be consistently exercising. If you aren't, it's no wonder why you feel burnt out. Exercise is one of the best stress management relievers in existence, and crucial for testosterone production as well. If you try to apply everything that I just taught you, but your sense of identity is still rooted in how much you work, none of it's going to matter because your sense of self-worth is still just based on how much you're working. So you will constantly find yourself reverting to continuing to overwork yourself because you believe that how much you work is an indicator of your value. And I'm speaking from experience here. When I first started my business, all of my identity was wrapped up in this hardworking, go-getter entrepreneur. So every time I would reach one of those rock bottoms and I would start to work on my mindset to come out of those rock bottoms, I would end up reattaching my ego to that entrepreneur energy, and I would work really, really hard to prove to myself that my self-worth matters. So long story short, you need to shift your identity and your self-worth away from how hard you work and value something else. And what you should value most is if you are genuinely giving your best self to the world. If you're constantly in a state of stress and burnout, you're not going to show up as the best version of yourself for your family. You're not going to show up as the best version of yourself for your work. And what you give to the world will be far lower quality than if you focus most of your self-worth and how you value yourself on being a good person and contributing to society. What makes a human being valuable and what you should base your self-worth on is the value you give to society and what you contribute to the world. If you think about it, the most successful thinkers and creators of all time, like Einstein and Newton, they weren't all the hardest workers. They were the clearest thinkers. A lot of us have past childhood traumas where we didn't get approval or attention from our parents if we didn't work hard enough. And society tends to reinforce this rat race mentality where the amount of hours you spend sitting in front of a computer is a reflection of your value to society. So this is deeply ingrained in a lot of us. But I would encourage you to focus more on the quality of what you're giving to the world. And on that note, if you hate your job, then what you're doing is going to make you burn out much faster because you don't enjoy what you're doing. But if you love your work and it sounds cliche, but if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. That's not entirely true. There's still going to be a lot of hard work, but it's much more rewarding and fulfilling when you are morally and ethically and just overall aligned with your work. If it suits you, you're going to enjoy your work a lot more. And when you're aligned with a sense of purpose, your work isn't going to burn you out nearly as much. 8 hours of work doing something that you enjoy almost all the time is going to be much more sustainable than spending 8 hours of your life every day doing something that you hate. So if you hate your career, look at me when I tell you this. You are going to die one day. I don't want you to spend the rest of your life stuck doing something that you hate. You have it within your power to find what you love to do and change your career. All of us are completely responsible for our situation, and you are fully capable of finding a career that you love and enjoy. So if you don't enjoy your career for the most part and you dread going to work every day, make it your mission right now to change that by all costs. And not only will that alleviate burnout, but it'll lead to you living a better quality of life and contributing to society at a higher level. To summarize this video, burnout lowers testosterone, and this is probably crushing your quality of life. So you need to start by identifying what matters most. You need to start living from a more parasympathetic nervous system and not be so easily riled up. You need to take care of your mental health and your mindset, and you need to live your life according to a purpose that deeply fulfills you instead of doing work that you hate. If you do all of these things, I won't say you'll never deal with burnout again, but you'll be much more equipped to handle it when it does strike, and it won't strike nearly as often. That's all I have for this video. I'll see you in the next one.